Wow, 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 wow. They say you should never meet your heroes. This is a hero car for me. I went on a road trip in one of these 40 years ago, almost. Same car, same colour, same motor, same everything. For all I know, this could be the exact same car. And here we are, almost 4 decades later, and we're about to go for a run to give it a really good fang. In today's world of modern turbocharged hot hatches and launch control EVs is the time I took off the rose-tinted glasses. Can a car like this still cut the mustard? Is it still a performance car? Or is it just some ancient relic that you trot out for cars and coffee once in a while? Well, let's get Mark, put him in the car, take it on some twisty roads, and we'll find out. And we're off. You and me, Mark, we're off again. Woohoo! In the mighty Porsche. It's so mechanical. It's just no power steering, windscreen right in front of you. If you've never driven one, viewer, then you should try to at some stage, because they are very special in their way. You feel all this weight behind you. It's still only light, isn't it?
I think if you're a car enthusiast, you have to drive one of these to see what they're all about.
Yeah, the first time you get in, you go, this is weird. Why doesn't the steering wheel move? Why are my legs all bent up?
Yeah.
But when you do get on it and drive them, they really go. And you've got that classic whaley sound, that breathless sound. Like that. 240 horsepower, something like that. Not a real lot.
It's not a lot. It's enough to get into a little bit of trouble, but
the ride's surprisingly good. I mean, it's firm,
yeah.
but it's okay, isn't it?
The ride is excellent. Like, it's damping these bumps really, really well, riding them really well.
Because this is 1250 kilos, which is a pretty light car,
yeah.
but it's small. Do you forget how cosy they are inside? This is not a car for mates like us. This is a car for partners. You know, it's just a little bit too intimate. I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable sitting this close to you, to be honest. Well, I'm not sure I do want to meet my heroes. This is really hot. There's two settings on the heater, somewhere between the surface of the sun and a blast furnace. Heating, it does very, very well. Cooling, not so much.
I think they didn't really get the air conditioning right, so they put water in their engines, did they, Stu?
No. This is the holy grail of the early cars. By 1984, they'd already been making these cars for 20 years, and they still had swing axles and torsion bars. They hadn't even gone to, coilover shocks or anything. This is the last of them, and they've got a particular character, haven't they? Volkswagen suspension geometry. Instead of multi-link and wishbones and things at the back, it's just got these great big aluminium hubs that are mounted in a really weird way with two big bushes. So when they pivot, everything changes. The camber and caster and toe in and everything changes, which is good if you're coming into a corner and you're squeezing on the throttle to drive through this bend here. The rear outside tyre gets a bit of toe in and negative camber, and it really squats and drives through. But the converse is that if you have a bit of a lift off or a bump going in.
That's how people used to get into trouble with them. Lift off, oversteer. As we know, there's nothing in the front of one of these cars. When you're pushing on, they do understeer. You get a bit of an understeer going, you'd lift off the throttle in a bit of a panic, and the back would come around with that exact situation you're talking about. And they could be a real handful. But having said that, when you drive them with the correct technique, they work really effectively.
The model that came after this, the 964, there were a lot of changes because it had multi-link rear suspension. They introduced all-wheel drive, coilover shocks, power steering, which is a shame really, because that's one of the delightful things about this car is that...
Well, the steering is great. When you're mobile and it got even at 80, 90 k's an hour here, the steering feels really good.
Yep. But at low speed?
Parking, difficult.
Yep.
But who cares, you buy a Porsche, you buy it to drive, and it actually has a really nice feel to it.
Yeah. As the last of the swing arm cars, this is a really cool car, and particularly so as it's an 84, because in Australia they introduced unleaded fuel in 85. Porsche realised that, saw that we had absolute mud that we're putting in our petrol tanks, and the engines were detonating and knocking, and so they started detuning them and putting low compression pistons in and all that kind of thing. So this is the holy grail. It's a 3.2, it's a coupe, not a Targa or a convertible, which aren't as valuable.
But it's I've driven a lot of these over the years, and quite a few on the track back in the 90s, some Porsche Cup here in Australia. it was just at a time when the 993s were coming out, and of course the 993 with independent rear suspension was just night and day better. But it was a lot of fun. They're not an easy car to drive fast. They are a little quirky, and that's one of the things we want to talk about today, about how do you drive one of these older 911s correctly and not have it bite you.
I don't know how many 911s they've made now, but they had over 1 million in 2017, and the umpteen generations. This was already a 20-year-old car when it came out, coming up to 40 years old since this car was made. So the 911's been around for coming up to 60 years. You know, it's unbelievable. They're so different from normal cars. Like if you get in even a BMW of this era, like a 323i, it just feels like a normal car with a bit more performance. Whereas this just feels completely different in so many ways.
It does.
You've got no adjustment on the steering wheel. It's a take it or leave it seating position.
Yeah, well, I've got my arm position right. I'm a little cramped on my legs. You probably never get it right. The steering wheel's off centre here on the right-hand drive cars. It's probably 2 centimetres off to the left. It's very close to the top of the dash. It's at a funny angle. That's just Porsche right there, that big tacho. The speedo's over to the side. It's kind of hard to actually look at the speedo, to be honest. Your hand's in the way of it all the time. But that lovely big tacho up the front, even the current 912 Porsche with the digital dash, the GT3 still have an analog tacho there, which I love.
I like the way you've got 3 oil gauges. You've got oil level, oil temperature, and oil pressure. They really love their oil.
So the gearbox, Stu, this is not the G50 in this car. That came a bit later, I believe.
That's right. The G50 came in about 87. This one was the old 915 box, which is still significantly better than the 901, which had a very, very weak first gear. But it's a good box, but it's long and it's slow and it's bulky.
It feels like it loses about 10 kilometres an hour on speed every time you shift up a gear, which is not great. And you do have to do it very slowly and deliberately. It's quite easy to go from when you're going from fourth to third to end up back in first gear.
Yeah.
And the synchros on this car feel a little tight. It's quite bulky on fourth gear and also fifth, so you really do have to ease it in. And it likes a bit of a double D clutch. That tends to help it as well. Being an older style gearbox, it does help.
What's many Ks on this?
The car's got 245,000 Ks on it, so I don't know if this is the original gearbox or it's been tidied up, but it feels like the gearbox needs a little bit of a birthday.
One thing you can say about these cars, even though you've got to learn how to drive them and finesse them, once you do know, they're incredibly strong. The way the doors close, we absolutely ragged this car 6 days in a row, Target Tasmania, year after year. At the end of the day was just check the brake fluid and the brake pads, top up the oil a little bit, and the next day was just as good. They are so strong.
6 left opens, then 300 after this. 10 left, 400. Then 300. Yep, 10 left, 400. Then crest, 8 left, short. Here's our 400. Love this bit. 8 left, short, and 9 right.
That small furry animal's done the whole state with them.
Do you know this car's got bigger brakes on the back than the front?
Yeah, well that's the end that's doing all the work, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel like I'm sitting over the front wheels.
It does feel a bit like that, doesn't it?
There's this real sense of involvement because the screen's so flat and it's right in front of you. And there's nothing in front except those Mickey Mouse headlights. Hey, how good was that?
Slightly newer version than this, I think it was a 964. But so often people buy these cars, as you said, Stu, and they don't really know how to drive them or what they're about, and they have pretty bad experiences with them and don't like the way they work. But does push on at about 5.5, doesn't it, Stu?
Yeah.
They do like to rev, even though there's a lot of torque there. That just pulls all the way up the rev range, and the more rev you use, the better it gets. But the steering has got a really nice load to it there.
Yeah.
You've just got to use the throttle correctly in that. It's all about getting that throttle correct. But
It's really interesting to compare it with the i30N we had a fortnight ago, isn't it?
You can't really, can you?
They're just so different. This is so mechanical and analog, isn't it?
Completely analog, and you know, and that's a good thing. You know, that's as a driver, that's what you want.
Is that steering weighting up at all?
Yeah, it does. It weights up mid-corner, but that's fine. You've just got to be ready for it.
Considering they're only 205s on the front, 225s on the back,
They're very skinny front tyres, and that doesn't help that whole understeer situation.
you can feel the weight transfer forward pretty well, can't you?
Yeah.
Under brakes.
The brakes are a little spongy on this car.
Are they? They're meant to be rock solid.
Yeah, it's not a rock solid brake pedal at all, so it just needs to bleed. The throttle is set, the throttle and brake is set up really nicely for heel and toe. You can blip the throttle beautifully. You can feel there mid-corner how the car just wants to push out.
Yeah.
And you've just got to be ready for that. It's not a problem. You just have to understand what the car's doing. Back on the throttle there, mid-corner the steering, it's heavy again.
That's nice.
Brake there, back on the throttle there.
Drive it through. Lift
And you
again.
can feel it's just superb, isn't it?
Drive it through. Yep.
And even on this long corner, I've just got a little bit of throttle on. It's not a car that you really want to coast in. If you're coasting through the entry to the corner, the car's not going to be particularly stable. It's really a matter of, you know, slowing the car down, getting it in the right gear, getting back on the throttle, driving it through the corner. The steering will load up mid-corner. Don't stress about it, just hang on, steer it with the throttle. You can feel there the rear just squats down beautifully, doesn't it? You can feel that rear end working, and the fact that the engine is over the back wheels, as it is in these cars, is actually to your advantage in that situation, but you have to drive it accordingly. The skinny front tyres on this car, there's no weight in the front, so it does push at the front really easily. So as a driver, you've got to make sure you don't provoke that. You turn smoothly. As you enter, you just start to squeeze the throttle on. If you have to come off the throttle, you ease off the throttle. If you snap off the throttle in one of these, you're backwards, as you know, Stu.
There you go.
It
That was
actually handles pretty good, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
for what it is, this is a good example of one, even if the gearbox is a little tight.
It's tight, mate.
It's a really nice
tight.
example of the car.
I must say, the race car, it actually surprised me how well it did stick. All these stories about lift-off oversteer. Mark could go hammering in there, quite deep on the brakes, trail brake in, and it'd still go around with no drama at all, even in the wet. So, once they're sorted...
Once they're sorted, and if you drive them smoothly.
Yeah.
If you're one of these people that are hanging off the steering wheel and lots of adjustments going on, and you're on and off the gas,
Yeah.
they're not particularly pleasant to drive.
Hey, I remember when I first went on that first road trip, it was so exciting. It could be this car, it really could. 84, ruby red, manual, coupe, sunroof.
Yeah.
It
Probably
could
wouldn't be that many around, would there?
The first thing I did when I got in it, I brought out a cassette.
A cassette, what's that?
It's an old way you listen to music when we were young.
Really?
You remember?
No.
It's even got
Okay.
Joe Jackson's Jumping Jive and the Reels Quasimodo Stream. It's straight out of 1981-82.
Wow.
And I put it in his cassette player and it immediately mangled the tape. So let's just see what happens. Turn it down on. Oh dear.
You've lost your cassette, mate. I hope it wasn't a really valuable one.
I think this is the same car. It's just eaten my cassette.
I told you that wasn't a good idea.
And it's got that breathless 911 sound, that faint smell of oil.
Yeah, it does have that little faint smell of oil, that's right.
It's a little bit bumpy on this. Such a nice motor. 3.2. You know, it's basically the same as the 3 litre, except that 80% of it is new. But to me, they're very, very similar. This one's just got more torque. It's the same bore, but they put the longer stroke crankshaft out of the turbo that came earlier, so the capacity went from 3 litres to 3.2. But it's just a really nice motor. All the foibles of the earlier ones, like the magnesium crankcase that stretched and all the things that went wrong, they sort of sorted them all out for this motor. So this is the one to have, a 1984 3.2 in the coupe preferably, although today I think I'd take the convertible.
Would you?
Yeah, just to get a bit more breeze coming through. because the air conditioning is designed for Europeans, not for us.
Probably one of the hardest racing cars I ever drove. 930 turbo Porsche from about this era.
Yep.
Race car, roll cage, big tyres, big brakes.
Yep.
You know, it was just trying to kill you at pretty much every corner.
Yeah. Righto, Mark, what's good about this car and what's bad about this car?
What's good about this car is the character, the heritage, the fact that it's such an important car for Porsche. And when you think of Porsche, this is probably the car that comes to mind, isn't it? Very slow on the gear shifts. I'm just not doing any snappy gear shifts in this car today. It's a very long throw.
I'll tell you what's good about it. On a cold winter's day, it'd be lovely. Today, it's about 40 degrees centigrade in here, and we're absolutely cooking. It's not so fun. It reminds me of the rally car. The offset seating position, no ABS, no airbags, the slow gearbox, the cassette player that eats cassettes for breakfast, rear seats are useless, headlights and things like that don't cut it by modern standards. And you know what? I actually don't want to own it now.
Really? That surprises me, Stu.
I can't afford it. The prices are just astronomical.
For me, it's quite hard to get over some of the quirky characteristics, the pedals that are into the floor like the old Volkswagens, the steering wheel that's off-centre. Those things, you sort of get used to them, but they do annoy me and they continue to annoy me. For ergonomics is really important for me as a driver to have right with a car, and they didn't get that right, in fact, until the 996 really did that, when they went water-cooled. And for me, that's a little bit of a downside, but you know what, it's a lovely car to drive, and I do appreciate them, and just the quality of the car. It's so well built.
When I was last looking at them decades ago, they were 35, 40 grand.
Yeah, right.
Now, I had a look through. There are quite a few that are less than 150 grand, but they're all either left-hand drive or cabrios or really bashed up.
Yeah.
If you want to buy a coupe with a 3.2 in good nick, you're paying $150,000.
Yeah.
And for that money, you can just about buy my 20-year younger 650 horsepower turbo.
Yeah, that's right.
And in fact, I came into today thinking, I wonder if I'd swap my turbo for this.
What's the thoughts now?
No way.
No? Really?
No. Yeah, I think I've moved on.
The world's really moved on so much, hasn't it?
We've been spoiled.
We have been spoiled, but I guess these cars made good drivers, didn't they? And that's the thing that's really important. The new cars flatter them. Like a turbo Porsche, you can get in and do pretty much anything. On a track, they're on the stability control all the time, saving the driver from crashing constantly. The driver is not even aware of it. These things, I've seen a lot of these crashed on racetracks over the years.
Performance about 3.3, about on par with the 635 BMW we drove out here. Personality, presentation, look at it, yes, very good. Practicality, not so good. Surprisingly good in the front, unless you want to put a big box or something in there. It's flat.
Yeah,
Golf clubs, yes. Anything tall, no. And price, no. I don't know how long it can go on. It's because they're so freaking expensive for what you get. I guess I'm just resentful.
Well, you've missed out and now you've moved on. But you're not bitter about it, Stu. Is that right?
Not much.
No.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not bitter at all. The 911 has always been the reliable sports car that you can drive every day if you want to, as this gorgeous example with 250,000 kilometres clearly shows. If you've already got an air-cooled Porsche, then go you. This is a car for two people only though. A grown-up will only ever get in the back of one once. It was very quick in its day, but 4 decades later the performance goalposts have moved quite a lot. So if you want an appreciating Porsche coupe that's thrilling to drive and enjoy every day, that's faster, makes the right noises, is way more comfortable and much safer, then get yourself a 987 Cayman S 3.2 and save yourself $100,000. Or if it simply has to be a 911 for you and you want that analog experience along with air conditioning that actually works, then how about you get yourself a 997 Carrera? That'll be cheaper.
So we have to say thanks to Peter for letting us use his amazing 84 911 Carrera here today. We've really enjoyed driving it. See you soon.